Caleb Talley, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing well, man. So I'm glad to have you on because this is kind of a selfish endeavor, to be honest with you, because I happen to be the chairman of the board of directors for the Tyler Innovation Pipeline, which is very similar to Startup Junkies, and
Okay.
it's a nonprofit 501(c)(3)
hmm
in Tyler. And so I'm going to pick your brain while we're on
hmm
this podcast, not just for the audience, but for my own benefit as well, because I think what you guys are doing, from what I can tell, is really cool, and I want to learn a lot about the work you're doing there, your background, and then I'll tell you something else that there's probably a good chance that you had some classes, maybe a fraternity brother
hmm
or knew some folks from Tyler. Arkansas is a very popular destination
It absolutely is.
for kids from Tyler.
hmm hmm
My girls both went to Grace Community School here in Tyler, and that seems to be one of the favorite stops for them. Rylan, my oldest, went to Alabama. My youngest, Abby, she went off to the University of Colorado in Boulder, but a lot of their friends ended up at Arkansas. So it's really good to visit with you, man.
It's good to visit with you, and I appreciate you having me on. And I can say for a fact, my freshman year of college, it's been a while now, but my freshman year of college, I think half of the freshman class was from Texas. Um, and I think that ratio has only probably increased over the last few years for sure. So it's like the University of Arkansas and Texas combined.
It
Uh,
really is, man. Well, I think it still is the case where if you maintain a certain GPA, then you get to pay like
mhm,
almost in-state tuition if you're from
mhm.
Texas, and so
Yep.
that makes it very appealing. And trust me, as a dad who's put 2 kids through school, God, that would have been nice if my girls would have considered Arkansas. But and here's another funny story, man. So here's my history with Arkansas. I was actually recruited to play football there out of high school, and this shows how old I am, how much older I am than you. Danny Ford, who won the national
Okay.
championship
Yeah.
at Clemson back in the day, he
Uh-huh.
was the head coach back then. And
Wow.
and I actually went up there for a visit. They flew me, and it was by myself. They sent the plane out to Sulphur Springs, Texas, to pick me up, both my recruiter and I. And I went on the visit. I loved it, and I wanted to be a Razorback. I wanted to go, but Danny Ford, he decided that he wasn't gonna give me a fall scholarship, but a spring scholarship.
Mm.
And only way I was getting to go to college,
Mhm.
either me paying for it or going on a scholarship. And so I'm like, all right, so if I go up there and I pay for a semester and he decides that he doesn't want me, there's no obligation for him to give me a scholarship.
Yeah.
So I didn't go to Arkansas, and I but it was and that was a tough pill to swallow too, man, because I love Fayetteville. I mean, yeah, it's a great, great school, man.
It's a great place to be in general, I think. I mean, I'm biased, obviously, as an alum myself, but it's a great place to be. Fast growing area with a lot of entrepreneurship, a lot of activity. So it's a lot of fun to see all that kind of come together. And probably his mistake to not offer you, because I don't think Arkansas has really had a lot to write home about in terms of football over the last few decades.
I know, they get so close, they look like they're gonna have something to
hmm
celebrate, and then boom, just
And
nothing.
then somebody has a motorcycle accident, it just
Exactly, exactly. Back then, the basketball program under Nolan Richards was
Mhm,
something. As a matter
mhm.
of fact, on my visit, I went and hung out with, Scotty Turman and Corliss Williams and in
That's awesome.
the dorm, and that was
Mhm.
pretty cool. That
That's awesome.
those dudes were like total celebrities at the time.
Oh, I imagine.
It was a lot of fun. Now, where are you from originally?
I'm from East Arkansas originally, so about 45 minutes from Memphis, in a
Okay,
town called Forest City.
okay.
That's where I graduated high school. But yeah, I went up to Fayetteville for college, and then worked a little bit in some other couple places in Arkansas, and worked my way back to
Okay.
Fayetteville.
All right. Well, so now let's get into it because we're going to be talking about, and one of the things that I talk a lot on this podcast about is entrepreneurship. I myself
Mhm.
am a serial entrepreneur, started and sold, have several exits and acquisitions, everything from startup to acquisition. And so I just love it. It's fun. And I like to talk to other people who understand it. And one of the things that I want to do today is let this be kind of an educational conversation between you and I
Mhm.
about the startup process. I always try to envision that
Mhm.
listener that's going to get the most out of this. Like,
mhm,
who's out there trying to start a business? And you know as well as I do, sometimes that can be buying revenue, sometimes it can be starting from scratch.
mhm,
There's the capital raise you gotta go through that people think
mhm,
it's so scientific when actually it's not, and they try to make it more complicated than it is. So, let's just start with kind of your entrepreneur's
mhm,
journey. How did you kinda get the startup bug, and then how did you
mhm,
find your way to Startup Junkies, and then kinda give us some of the DNA of
mhm.
that organization and what you guys are doing over there?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm a little bit non-traditional, in the terms of kind of where I am now. So I actually graduated from the University of Arkansas with a degree in journalism and political science. Did not want to go into business, was not curious about business. And so I was a newspaper reporter for a while, and I was editor of a business magazine for a while. And that's kind of how I found myself in and around the entrepreneurial scene in Northwest Arkansas. It's kind of coming at it from a coverage standpoint. There's all this heat and energy taking place, all of these, cool ideas, and there's businesses being launched, folks raising money. And so I came at it from a journalistic angle. And I like to tell people I'm a recovered journalist. Um, I don't do the deadlines anymore or anything like that. Still write just to keep from getting rusty. But seeing what was going on in Northwest Arkansas in terms of the entrepreneurial scene, it was just exciting to just to be around. And so at that time, I was living in Little Rock, working for a magazine there. And I took every opportunity I could to come to Northwest Arkansas just to have proximity to some of that activity. I tell people kind of what started my interest in Startup Junkie specifically was it was a startup weekend that Startup Junkie was hosting. And it's a kind of a very tailored event that Techstars kind of created. And the idea is you come together. It's kind of like, I don't know if you know old school church lock-ins. So
Oh,
you
yeah.
go
Oh,
to
absolutely.
the
Yeah.
gym that shut the door, you're there all evening. Think lock-in, but for aspiring entrepreneurs. So the event, and I was covering it as a journalist at this time, trying to just kind of tracking some of the activity. But the idea is all of these people that are interested to buy a ticket, the ticket covers their meals for the weekend and the resources, but they come in on a Friday evening, have some drinks, have dinner. And then there's this pitch element where everybody's presenting ideas. Everybody is coming with something that they're brainstorming. So everybody pitches an idea. The audience of their peers, the folks that are participating, all kind of vote on the best ideas. The top 10 kind of rise to the top. The rest of the folks whose ideas weren't kind of chosen as a competitor in the arena, they get to join one of the teams for one of these concepts. And then over the course of the weekend, these ideas are kind of developed, hashed out. It's taking place right downtown. So our office is right on the historic downtown square in Fayetteville. And so a lot of the activity is taking place in there. And so, that next morning, Saturday morning, you've got the farmer's market, you've got all this activity, you got hundreds of people walking about. So it gives them the opportunity to go out, do some customer discovery, talk to people walking their dogs. Hey, what do you currently do to solve for X? To try to really kind of hash out their idea. And then it all kind of culminates to this big demo day where these very rudimentary but much more complete concepts are put together and presented on a stage, and then prize money is given away. So that was kind of my introduction to Startup Junkie specifically, and was familiar with the organization. Um, a little bit at the surface level. I knew some folks that had worked there because I'd known them in college. And then they had a position for a marketing director come available. I said, I've never done marketing in my life, but I have been on the other side of the table in journalism, so I can fake it
Mhm.
to an extent. I carried a lot of that imposter syndrome pertaining to that role for quite a long time. And I joked that I was the last man standing. Startup kind of serves as a launch pad for careers too. And so a lot of folks go on to start their own ventures or join startups after they've been at Startup Junkie for a while. And I joked that I was the last man standing when a bunch of folks jumped onto other opportunities, and was the tenured employee when I took over as executive director. But have been doing that. Will be 5 years in May. And I love every bit of the work that we do. So much of it is really palpable. I know a lot of places you can't necessarily see the impacts that you have on the community you serve. I feel like we can really see a lot of that impact play out in real time.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I love, with the organization I was telling you about, Tyler Innovation Pipeline, is that whenever you have it's pretty easy to link a business, especially that was birthed out of the organization, and then how many employees that they have, and kind of quantitate the, or quantitatively arrive at the economic impact they have on the community. It's so cool to see that and
Mhm,
think that if we were not here, those jobs might not be here, that idea might not be here, that restaurant
mhm.
might not be there. And so it's really a lot of fun. How are you guys funded?
So we're third party funded. Over the last few years, I've kind of piecemealed some different federal and state grants to help us kind of operate from an operational standpoint. So a lot of our funding also comes from the programs that we run. So the Walton Family Foundation of Walmart fortunes, they fund a lot of our programmatic work. From an operational standpoint, we have a grant from the USDA to serve rural business development, the Economic Development Administration, the SBA, with just kind of whenever opportunities arise, we seek them out. We try to do that in a way that is not necessarily capacity building, but trying to stack funding on top of kind of what we're already doing. Because we operate with a pretty lean team of folks. We like to say startup junkies are Swiss Army knives. We've got a small team that are all just kind of just trying to get stuff done. So whenever I pursue funding, I try to make sure that we're not having to add a whole nother set of metrics or goals that we're having to chase down, but trying to get funded for what we're already doing. But yeah, a lot of our funding is driven by the programs that we run. So, just at its core, Junkie does one-on-one consulting. So that is kind of our bread and butter, where it all began. So we meet with, I used to say 800 to 1,000 entrepreneurs a year in one-on-one consulting. We actually surpassed 2,000 last year, unique consulting meetings. And then we're on pace to hit 2,000 again this year, just based on this first quarter. And so, we're kind of top of the funnel in that regard. Anybody with an idea, we're at absolutely no cost to the entrepreneur. So you get some folks come in with some really cool ideas, and then you get some folks come in with some real stinkers, and some interesting ideas that you might, send them with a lot more extra homework to kind of hack away at that. And then our events, we do about 250 events in a year. And for a team of about 6 or 7, it's also just a pretty crazy cadence of activity. And so, those are lunch and learns, workshops, networking events, happy hours. And so just opportunities to kind of bring folks together to kind of collaborate and potentially meet other folks that are doing a lot of the similar stuff within that entrepreneurial community. So that's kind of us at our core, but the programs that help drive a lot of our funding are our accelerator program. So you mentioned just having kind of a finger on the pulse of some of that economic development and job creation. Our accelerator program recruits companies from all over the country and the world to Northwest Arkansas for a 10-week program. Started out as artificial intelligence and machine learning companies, and we've expanded that to include 2 additional cohorts, one that focuses on healthcare and another that focuses on cybersecurity. We'll launch the cybersecurity for the first time this summer. But we're recruiting about a dozen companies from all over the country to come to Northwest Arkansas for that period of time. And our ulterior motive is to introduce them to Northwest Arkansas, help them formalize some of those relationships within the business community, help build on those connections to the enterprises that they're trying to sell into, with the goal of them either opening a sales office or relocating entirely to Northwest Arkansas. And that way we can just absolutely see the job creation in the region. And that program is funded by the Arkansas Economic Development Commission and the Walton Family Foundation, for that reason. I mean, we've had close to 60 companies come through the region through this program and about 140 jobs created during that span of time. and maybe a dozen of those companies have relocated to Northwest Arkansas. So it's exciting to see. I mean, we're kind of like cheerleaders for the region in that regard when folks are coming, trying to make sure they're getting out and getting plugged in. But another one of the programs that kind of drives a lot of our funding too is our Kiva program. So Kiva is an international nonprofit that serves micro lending. So in Northwest Arkansas, we have a Kiva hub that allows us to raise loans for disadvantaged borrowers, folks that wouldn't necessarily be able to go into a bank and get a small business loan on their own. We do that through crowdfunded microloans of $25 increments. And so we actually just surpassed $1 million lent out through that program at the beginning of this year. And those are some of the most palpable impacts that we can see. I mean, those are folks with a food truck that need a new griddle, or a sandwich shop that needs a new sign, or like a massage, a masseuse that needs a new table, that sort of thing. So very palpable outcomes. But thanks to that funding, that helps us cover our payroll.
I love that, man, and that's one of the things I think is so important about these organizations like Startup Junkie is that, a lot of folks, they don't have anywhere to go. Like, I know one of the things, like, are you guys tied to the university at all?
We do a lot of work with the university, but we're not formally tied.
Yeah, so we've done both with the tip. I mean, we've been, very engaged with, the University of Texas Tyler at times, and
Mhm,
then we haven't been, and one of the things that I think that is really cool about an organization like Startup Junkie is that it helps to for one, a lot of people aren't gonna go to college. They're not gonna be a part of the
mhm,
university, and for that and you mentioned it, the food truck, the beautician, the people that
mhm,
and these were folks that just had an idea and just rolled the dice and chased that dream, and now they're actual small business owners, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, what do I do?" And some of them
mhm,
kinda figure it out as they go. Most of them do.
mhm,
They had to have the tools, and not only that, but just have the human capital and the collective wisdom that you
mhm,
guys can offer. I think that's really cool. One of the things that, I'm curious about 'cause you guys now here's one of the things that you guys have done differently than us, is we started out as more of a maker space. It was kind of
mhm,
like for inventors because the first chairman that I followed, a guy named, Phil Burks, one of my mentors, uh, unbelievably successful founder, but he's also he's a tinkerer, with radio operating, and that's what he loves to build,
mhm,
and he is an inventor. And so we're shifting more to what you guys are doing to make it more of an entrepreneurial space, to create that ecosystem of capital
mhm,
and ideas, finding finding a place, kinda like a Y Combinator type deal.
mhm,
And it
mhm,
sounds to me like you guys have taken more of the Y Combinator,
mhm,
kind of model, and it's been successful. Tell this audience of all of the startup folks that have come through, uh,
mhm,
you guys, what are some of the common threads for success whenever you see
mhm,
an entrepreneur come in, all the way from their communication style, how they are able to convey the idea that they want to launch or that they have launched and need help to grow? What
mhm,
are some of the things that you and your board and kind of what is that process? Does if I have an idea that I want to start a company, do I walk in and say, "Hey, Caleb, I had this idea. I've got an app I wanna build," or whatever the case may be. What do I do next? Kinda what does that look like, and what have you
mhm,
seen are kind of the threads for success?
mhm. I would say the threads for success and like I mentioned earlier, I mean, we're kind of top of the funnel. So we see folks that have an idea written on the back of a napkin all the way up to, maybe they're getting ready to exit. So we see a broad spectrum of folks of all ages, all backgrounds, all levels of maturity when it comes to ventures. But if I were to take a look and kind of try to boil that down to a common thread, I think some of those things would be a bias towards action. A bias towards action is always something that a successful entrepreneur is going to have because they're going to want to, everybody has ideas, but the folks that actually have a startup are the ones that have that bias towards action that actually went out and took that leap and took that step. Um, but also a willingness to learn, adapt, and be coached. Because that's one area we run into with clients when they come in and everybody kind of falls in love with their idea. And sometimes they need a little coaching in a certain direction. And the folks that know everything already and don't really need a ton of advice. And they think that this is, good as is, and don't really want to listen to some advice or some coaching. They might have a different different path, different outcomes. And part of that process, in regards to that coaching, comes in play through we kind of we do the lean canvas, so we don't coach anybody towards a 40-page business plan. I mean, there's no need in it at the stage that they're in when they come to us, unless they're trying to go get a bank loan or something, and then we typically send them to the SBDC, ASBTDC alphabet soup, the Small Business Technology Development Center, to help with that. We start with the lean canvas. Test your assumptions. What's the problem? What's the solution? What are your, what's your customer discovery process look like? And so part of that initial process is kind of giving them homework to better understand what the customer wants, needs, is currently using. And so we coach them that direction. And so I mentioned with that startup weekend, being able to send people out to talk to 100 people in the square during a farmer's market, that comes into play, because we send people out to talk to 100 different people and ask those questions, and not ask them because, we live in the South and everybody's going to be like, oh yeah, I would happily buy your widget. You've got to send them out to say, what are you currently doing for X? Do you find this is a problem? Would you be willing to spend money to improve this process or that process, and kind of figure out where their head's at without having to say, would you buy this?
Mhm.
Because more times than not, they're going to be polite. But kind of getting an understanding, and we tell them start with 100 people and go ask 100 people. And if 90 people tell you that, give you, you're testing the assumptions, that give you indication that they probably wouldn't buy it as is, then it's time to kind of pivot what you're working on. And the folks that aren't willing to pivot are the ones that aren't going to succeed, or go very far with that. And folks, tell people, a good entrepreneur has to be resilient. They have to be willing to take no and get some, bad feedback every now and then, and take it and learn from it. So I think just being coachable, and being willing to take that no and learn from it and pivot, is critical. And as we walk them through those early processes, just trying to understand what the customer wants and whether or not this is a valuable solution. Every good venture is a solution to an existing problem, but is that solution, viable in terms of cost, or, accepted by the customer?
What are some of the biggest success stories that you've had come out of Startup Junkies? Like, where the big businesses that have been just really just crushed it?
Yeah, and we've had some, that we've worked with. So, for example, one of the companies that came in through our accelerator program, was a company called Ox. Used to be called Oculogics. It utilized Google wearables, and was a technology-based company that is now being kind of deployed in Walmart. And we've seen that company since hire 50 plus people, raise over $12 million. And I believe she was 21 years old when she launched that venture and came to Arkansas from Atlanta, and permanently relocated to Northwest Arkansas. And so on the, high tech end, you've got that. You've got, given that we are in Walmart's background, you've got a lot of retail products that see a lot of success. So one of my favorites is a company called Libsyn. It's a very durable clothing, made for the sustainable minded, outdoor person. So pants that will, that you go hiking in, that will last, forever, as long as you can fit in them, which is typically my problem. I'm not likely to rip them. I'll, might just not fit in them anymore. They took the right approach to go out and get revenues out in front of costs, and did Kickstarter with the launch of every new product they added to their clothing brand. And so it was almost like customer discovery in and of itself. So they went out to raise the money to actually produce the product via Kickstarter, and has since became the highest or most successful Kickstarter campaigns in the state of Arkansas, I think twice over, and beat his own record to launch those products. And now he's going into a bunch of stores, and which is awesome to see. When I first started at Startup Junkie, to see kind of that formalizing, to seeing that going into, outdoor retail stores across the country, is exciting to see, just from that 0 to 60. I mean, there are a ton. Um, I mean, I feel like, well, which one's your favorite kid? Like, yeah, I can't pick my favorite job. But we work with a lot of really cool entrepreneurs that are doing a lot of really cool stuff, and they run the gamut. I mean, you've got folks that are doing some really cool tech enabled projects, and then you've got some folks that are doing some really cool physical, you know, stuff with their hands, and so it just runs the gamut.
So one of the things that I think about a lot, now that I'm older, I was 28 whenever I moved to Tyler and bought my first business. It's a totally different time. It was 21 years
Mhm.
ago. I was much younger, more naive, probably uh, thought I was way smarter than I really was. And so a lot of those factors allowed me to do that. As you see people coming in now, and just the world has changed so much economically, and we've survived the financial crisis of '07, '08. Is there a sense of optimism that you're seeing come through your doors? Are people still fired up? And is that kind of that American entrepreneurial spirit
Mhm.
that I don't care who I am, where I'm from, I've got an idea. And one of the things that the guy that I mentioned earlier, Phil Burks, one of my mentors, one of the best quotes he ever made about people who are entrepreneurs, he said, is that he said, an entrepreneur will work 90 hours a week to avoid working 40 hours a week.
Mhm.
We will do anything to not have that quote unquote real job, the 9 to 5. Do you sense that there's still a good number of people that are wanting to pursue that entrepreneurial dream?
Absolutely. Our founder, Jeff Ebron, has said before, which actually made me think about it. He said that he as a serial entrepreneur, he's downright unemployable. Um, having launched and exited and been involved in entrepreneurship so many times, he's downright unemployable. I absolutely do, and I think part of our region kind of plays into that too. You've got so many people that are moving into the region. I think that the numbers are like 30 people a day, something like that, into Northwest Arkansas for a variety of reasons, not just Walmart. You've got Tyson, you've got JB Hunt, you've got all the university, you've got all this heat and energy around enterprises. You got folks that are coming in to work for these industries and their families. Um, but once you get here and the proximity to the activity that's taking place, it's contagious, I think. So I think outside of just kind of that spirit of entrepreneurship, there's like a spirit of seeing others do it right in front of you and seeing people have success. And we've got a pretty diverse region in that. I mean, some of the folks that we serve. Um, so a fun fact for somebody's trivia one day, Northwest Arkansas is home to the largest population of Marshallese outside of the Marshall Islands in the Pacific.
Really?
Um, and so we're seeing a great deal of folks come through the door. Marshallese individuals come through the door the last, few months, to engage with our Kiva programming, for folks that have been kind of, unable to get small business loans. We've seen them come through the door to launch businesses with those Kiva loans, supported by their community, friends and neighbors through those microloans, and then go out and start businesses, just because our goal at Shark Junkie has always been to, as I view it, to lower barriers. The ultimate goal is to lower the barrier as much as possible. And, we don't have all the answers, but we do try to leverage what resources we do have. And a lot of times it is just access to folks that can help. I tell people that sometimes we're just opening up our Rolodex to people, and sometimes that's all it takes. But in lowering those barriers, and helping folks get their foot in the door to entrepreneurship, somebody sees that and then somebody else gets excited by that, and then they follow that. And we don't spend a ton of money on marketing. We don't necessarily have to. We haven't had to, just because success begets success a lot of times. And so some of the folks that we're helping, when they go out and really kind of hit their groove, their neighbor sees that and they want, well, I've been sitting on this idea for, years. So like I've just never known what to do with it. And so it just kind of flows in that regard. So I think as long as we're able to lower those barriers, we find that there are people that want to get in on the action. They just don't know where to even begin. A lot of the people that come through our doors don't even know what they don't know. They don't even know what questions to ask. So a lot of our job, a lot of the times we tell people we're kind of like a sounding board for them as well. But most of the times we're asking them questions, and kind of leading them to kind of solve their own things they already kind of know deep down, test their own assumptions, but we're kind of asking a lot of the questions and kind of guiding them in that regard.
That's one of the great things I think that an organization like yours offers is, I mean, we all hear the horror stories. Those of us who have gone in and done a pitch, that it can be brutal. You go to that VC and all that you prepare this incredible deck for them, and the only thing they do is they throw it aside and say, "How do you make money?" That's what I
Hmm.
wanna know. We can get into all this later, but tell me how you make
Hmm.
just tell me the story. And it can be pretty brutal, and I think a lot of people think it's Shark Tank, but it's not always Shark Tank. Sometimes when you're raising capital, it's just going to coffee with a lot of different very well
Hmm.
like in Thailand, this area, it's going to it's taking some doctors, some oil and gas guys, maybe some attorneys that they're fascinated by business. They're looking for alternative investments. They believe
Hmm.
in you and what and that's a thing too that I have found, and I bet you could attest to this from the people that you've seen, is that you can have a B idea, but if you've got an A team behind a B idea,
Hmm.
and most people will they can recognize that, and they're like, "Yeah, I'm gonna bet on you." The idea sounds
Hmm.
it's okay, it's cool, it may or may
Hmm.
not be the next big thing, but I believe in you. I think that's one of the things that can kinda prepare that entrepreneur for when if they do find themselves having to go into
Hmm.
formal pitch, which probably that's another thing too, and I'd like to talk a little bit about this because I think it's one of the things that people
Hmm.
get scared of is raising money, is capital. I'm
Hmm.
actually going through like right now, I've got a stack here of documents. I'm about to do a capital raise for a business that we're starting up, and I think a lot of people they think it's like buying a house. You gotta save up
Hmm.
20%, and there's this formulaic way to do it, and it's real hard, and it's complex,
Hmm.
but then they also hear of bootstrapping, then they hear about friends and family,
Hmm.
then they hear about a mezz round and a Series A. Kind of help that small entrepreneur out there that they have concluded in their mind, "I've
Hmm.
got a great idea. I know I can
Hmm.
make this work,
Hmm.
but I just don't have the money." And it's so I just can't even fathom raising for a lot of those folks, man, it's like $10,000 might as well be trying to raise 10,000,000. They have no idea.
Hmm. Yeah.
Kinda help people kinda come off back off the ledge of that, of this whole
Yeah.
the mystery, surrounding raising capital.
Yeah. Well, I would start off by saying, we get a lot of people that come to the door that assume that they need to raise capital just out of the gate. And we try to talk those folks off the ledge too, because it's like getting on a treadmill sometimes and you can't get off until your investor's ready to get off. So we try to talk those people back a little bit, and encourage folks to only go that route if they have to. If their venture is in a position to where, say, it doesn't work unless you can scale and you can't scale. Uh-oh, did I freeze? Sorry.
You're back.
Sorry. We try to walk them back from the ledge in regards to, if if their venture only works if it operates at scale, and can only operate at scale if they have, the backing to do so, then it makes sense to raise. If you're starting a food truck or a restaurant downtown or something like that, and you just don't necessarily have the capital you think you need to get going, maybe look at alternative routes. And so that's kind of where we try to open that Rolodex too and try to talk people through options and opportunities. to help them in that regard without going straight out to try to get some investors. But the folks that do need to raise capital, and I will say that in Northwest Arkansas, we're far from Silicon Valley. We've got a lot of growth left to do in terms of really developing out kind of that VC arm. I think the state of Arkansas as a whole has a lot of work left to do to really kind of develop out that the accredited investors available to. It's hard to raise money. It's hard to raise money anywhere, but it's hard to raise money in Arkansas, I believe. And quite frankly, I think it should kind of be hard to raise money to an extent. I mean, it's just part of the market economy. Should be kind of shouldn't be easy, I guess you should say. Um, but for those going out and pursuing investors, I would say look at each potential investor as and understand it in terms of a relationship. It's not entirely transactional. And this is somebody that you're going to be connected to and doing business with for the long term, depending how long, it is until you're acquired or exit or whatever the goal is. Understand what the goal is when going out, of course, first, but understand what kind of relationship you want to have with a potential investor. Because sometimes could be way more than money. Obviously, an investor is going to, like you mentioned, Shark Tank. Folks could see on Shark Tank, they're selecting which investor they want to go with based on what level of activity a certain investor can have within their own venture, or what else they bring to the table. So every investor is going to be able to bring something to the table, whether their individual network, their experience, their passion for this, that, or the other. So I think really understanding what type of investor you need and what you're looking for, and having that kind of solidified before you even really kind of form out that list. I mean, it shouldn't be, at least, casting a wide net and catching whoever will fit in the net, but really being a little strategic in that regard. And then knowing and understanding when you get to that pitch, understanding who's in the room, who you're talking to, and what motivates them. If they are motivated by, if it's a social project or a mission driven venture, understanding who you're talking to and what's important to them. Because, that should be included in that deck if so. And if not, it might be somebody that just wants to know how you're making money. They don't want to see that deck at all, to your point. So I think it's just really doing all the homework associated with that. And it's still not going to be easy. I mean, it's not designed to be easy, but and it shouldn't be easy, but it's possible.
Yeah. I think that one of the problems too is the whole overnight success thing, like, Airbnb and Grubhub, all Uber Eats, Uber and
Hmm.
all these companies. People don't see what happened before those companies came into being. The
Hmm.
Airbnb story is one of my favorite ones. The journey that those guys took and some of the crazy things they did early on and during those days where they knew that they couldn't scale, like when they were trying to figure out customer service, they're like, okay,
Hmm.
what would the ultimate, customer experience be? And then they ratcheted back from there. Just some really good best practices came out of
Hmm.
that company. And then I think you're exactly right in that it needs to be hard. You will not appreciate it, and you're just and if you're not willing to take on the hard, as the Navy SEALs say, if you can't embrace the suck, then you don't need to be an entrepreneur.
Hmm.
One of my favorite stories, I've told this to anyone who will listen, because I'm kind of becoming old, so I mentor quite a few young entrepreneurs, and a lot of times, I explain it that a lot of people like the idea of being an entrepreneur, but they will
Hmm.
despise the reality of it, and I equate it to this
Hmm.
time where I got this crazy notion, man, that I thought it'd be a good idea for me to get a Harley Davidson Softail. I thought it looked really cool. I thought I looked like on this thing. I was like, this might be kinda fun. So, buddy of mine from church, he had borrowed one. He had a motorcycle, and he was borrowing a Harley Sportster, and he said, "Hey, if you wanna try to ride it, then meet me at the church parking lot. We'll ride around." "Alright, cool." Dude, I had laid that thing over inside of, like, 40 seconds and spoiled the crap out of it, man. And so it was a cool idea. I liked the thought of having a motorcycle, but the
Mhm.
reality was a disaster. And I think
Mhm.
it is for a lot of entrepreneurs is they like the idea. And then you got guys like, and I'm not knocking him. I think he's great. And
Mhm.
I reference him a lot, but you got guys like Gary Vaynerchuk and,
Mhm.
making entrepreneurship so sexy, seems so cool.
Mhm.
And everybody can do
Just
it.
go do it.
Just
Yeah.
go do it. Just go post 975 times an hour and all of a
Exactly.
sudden
Yeah.
you will be in, and so but at the end of the day, there is no overnight success, and there's a lot of
Mhm.
failures along the ways, man. I mean,
Mostly failures.
oh, absolutely,
Mhm.
absolutely. But then it goes back to, and this is one of the things too, man, that I went and got my MBA, and I don't know that for anybody listening that's real high on education or whatever, I'm not knocking the whole educational system, but I'll say this: I liked Tim Ferriss's approach better. If you know anything about Tim Ferriss, did his undergrad at Princeton, and then whenever he was thinking about, I think he wanted to go to Stanford for business school. And at the time he was looking at going, it was going to cost him probably close to what it cost me to go to SMU, which is a little over 100 grand. And he thought to himself, all right, do I want to go spend 2 years kind of simulating business and getting the education?
Mhm.
Him would have been amazing. I mean, Seth Godin went to Stanford Business School. A lot of great entrepreneurs come out of there. He said, or would I rather take that money and invest it in myself and even the failures, like you mentioned, Caleb, even the failure
Mhm.
would be education. And
Mhm.
that's the route he chose. He's like, I would rather take that money and invest it in myself and starting a business. And even if the business fails, I get a real life education. Yes,
Mhm.
you don't get that credential that we in America are uber obsessed with, but he got the experience. I'd say it worked out well for him. I think an organization like yours, and hopefully one day, if we get the Tyler Innovation Pipeline where I want it to be, you got the deck in Dallas, the Dallas Entrepreneur Center,
Mhm.
all these places popping up. I hope that Startup Junkie becomes a place where that person having that Tim Ferriss moment of, do I
Mhm.
want to go to business school or do I want to go seek out some advice, some mentors, some wisdom, some real life experience and take that money and appropriate it there, that it becomes a true consideration. And I think it's one that people
Mhm.
should have.
Mhm. No, I agree 100%. And I think really kind of, um, it's not de-risking, but demonstrating, it as a legitimate opportunity. We do a lot of stuff in the high schools too. We're actually doing a pitch competition in one of the local high schools later this month, where we'll give students, high school students, the opportunity to go pitch for some cash, just to really kind of get a feel for it. Our founder, I referenced earlier, Jeff, he's an adjunct professor in small business ventures and entrepreneurship. And he'll be the first one to tell you there's this kind of like bubble around academia where it's, some of it's not real life. And it's, the textbook isn't always the playbook in that regard. And so really getting that experience is invaluable. But we like to give people kind of a view of it as a legitimate option. I think I also like to reference the story occasionally. When I started Startup Junkie, we went and participated in a career fair at the University of Arkansas. It was at the Bud Walton, the basketball arena. We're on the concourse, and you've got all of these businesses that everybody's very familiar with. There's some of these enterprises that are in Northwest Arkansas that anybody would recognize. Set up shop. They've got folks there in suits and ties, and you've got lines of kids with their resumes wanting to talk to these executives and folks that are making themselves available. And then we're sitting there with our kind of entrepreneurship booths um, and not talking to anybody. I mean, nobody's coming up to us at all, because it's like, why would I go that route? That's, it's so scary. It's not secure. I want a secure job. Well, then the pandemic happened and all those people with super secure jobs got pink slips. And then we're looking for opportunities to really try to be their own boss. I think that's where some of the sexy aspect of entrepreneurship. Folks want to do it. They want to do it because they don't want to be their own boss. But you've got to work 10 times harder than you would if you were at one of those cushy jobs. But we just kind of seen a shift over the last few years. And I don't know if it was the pandemic or what that really kind of drove a lot of that. I'm assuming so, just because people are already at home. to where people really saw it as a legitimate opportunity to pursue entrepreneurship and pursue being kind of taking, getting hold of their own fate and their own destiny versus putting that fate in the hands of somebody else, whether in an academic setting or in one of those established enterprises. But we've just seen that shift, and still saying, if we were to go sign up at a career fair tomorrow, I promise our line would be just as long as some of those other lines. But I think still some people think that it is just, you know, you flip the switch on your shock and you start counting money. There's still that disconnect and what it might actually take to really be a successful entrepreneur. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier around giving folks homework. Um, we give folks a lot of homework when they come to us, and they don't have to do it. And the folks that do it and then come back, those are the ones that, we kind of know have what it takes to at least start that journey. And the folks that never come back, didn't do the homework, those are the ones that probably are better off at that desk job anyway, because they're not going to do what it takes to put in the 90 hours a week, to really kind of see an idea come to fruition.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you something. Let me just go ahead and confirm your assumptions on the pandemic. They're absolutely spot on. James Altucher, one of my favorite. That's one of the best podcasts that there is to listen to, especially for business folks, entrepreneurs. James Altucher is unbelievable, and also I would recommend is great reading for
Hmm.
any of your folks that come through your doors. Both of his books, Skip the Line and Choose Yourself, are two of the best entrepreneurial reads out there. And one of the things that James said on his show one day was that during the pandemic, going into the pandemic, there were 30% of workers in America were freelance workers. Now, after post pandemic, 60% of people are doing some sort of freelance
Wow.
work. So
Mm.
you're exactly right. One of the scary things is, and one of the, I think, where organizations like yours tip, and then of course, I think, you've got a great governor there in Sarah Huckabee Sanders. I'm sure she'll fight for this. Is out in California, what they've done with union help is they've started to basically take all of the freelance workers and convert them into employees, and it's destroying that ability in
Mm.
the economy out in California. Well, now, we
Wow.
do that on a federal level as well. So
Mm.
a lot of what we're talking about and the beauty and the magic of it to give that
Hmm.
the person that did stand in that line to go get a job at McKinsey or somewhere like that, they got the job, but they also want to do something on the side. Well,
Hmm.
literally setting up laws right now in the Department of Labor to where they have to they're basically, if you're an Uber driver, now you have to become a W-2 employee. Now, they did exempt some of the
Hmm.
share places, but either way, the federal government and some of these states
Hmm.
are not like Arkansas, are coming after
Hmm.
these entrepreneurs and forcing them in the name of workers' rights by basically taking this ability away from 'em. And it's a shame because what you just said, man, I'm telling you,
Hmm.
yeah, during the pandemic, when people started losing jobs and realized
Hmm.
that I still have a skill that I can go use and I
Hmm.
can just go direct to consumer, direct
Absolutely.
or
Yeah.
it has changed everything. And that's an awesome thing. I've got a daughter who's out in Atlanta, and she works for and she's in the healthcare, industry, but also she's a photographer and is crushing it.
Hmm.
She's driving back to Tuscaloosa almost every weekend during
Wow.
graduation season doing graduation
Hmm.
pics, and now she's gonna do some wedding shoots, and it's so cool, man, to see that we live in a time where entrepreneurship, it's never easy, but let me tell you something, the barriers to entry to doing something are better than they've ever been, which kind of brings up my next take I'd like to get from you because you see all
Hmm.
sorts of people walk through your doors. So, I think that people have this idea that if I want to be an entrepreneur, one, it has to be some big, hairy, audacious goal and just an unbelievable idea. And two, if I have it to pursue it, then I have to quit my job, forsake all, burn my ships and,
Hmm.
all this. And so therefore that keeps them from it. What
Mhm.
do you say to that person that says, my idea is so small, that's not entrepreneurship, or that one, my idea is so big, I'm gonna have to quit my job and everything and just eat ramen noodle and live without electricity for 6 months to get it started. What do you say to kind of those extreme mindsets as it
Yeah.
relates to pursuing an entrepreneurial venture?
Yeah. Well, the folks that have, that side hustle that they don't really think is much to really write home about, we just encourage them to keep at it. And we do see those come through the door too, and they're not necessarily pursuing the same sort of resources, of course, but we're encouraging them to set up the best practices, get an accountant to help them separate those finances. Because sometimes the folks that are doing those little side hustles are kind of got their finances all mixed up. And that's where a lot of times we see people when they've reached a pain point, and that a lot of time that's, it's like, hey, we're not the IRS, so we're not going to go down that route. But the folks that have this, big idea and they're ready to put in their 2 weeks notice, we always encourage people, don't quit your job yet, regardless of what you're working on. Don't quit your job yet. And the best piece of advice, that I've heard is when it's time for you to quit your day job, you'll know it. There'll be that inflection moment where it's like, I cannot go from B to C or C to D with this venture because of my day job, or my venture is preventing me from being able to do my day job. There's going to be that moment. And I encourage people not to burn the ships until they've reached that moment, because why not let somebody else pay you to build your startup in the interim? So just, take a deep breath. Entrepreneurship is, like you mentioned earlier, 90 hours a week to really kind of turn an idea into reality. So a lot of times you are going to have to work on that at home. But let somebody else pay you while you build that. There's no reason not to. Let somebody else cover your insurance while you're building this venture. And then when the time comes to really buckle down and go 100% both feet into that venture, you'll know it. It'll become inevitable.
Yeah, and I think one of the things too that you gotta take advantage of these days is the fact that with so much remote work happening, if you really wanna take
Hmm.
advantage, one of my John Acuff, he says this, like, if there's a difference between working from home and just being at home, and he says, if you're somebody that works from home, then
Hmm.
you need to treat it as though you're getting up, you can get dressed, look your
Yep.
best, and go to like you're going to the office, you just might be going to your home
Hmm.
office. Uh,
Hmm.
and if you had that time now, the beauty of that is instead of filling that time watching reruns of Dukes of Hazzard, then instead, which is awesome if you do that, Bo and Duke doing some hood sliding and shooting flaming arrows at doing that on a Tuesday afternoon at 12:30, awesome. But if you wanna better use that time, then instead of having to be in an office in a cubicle looking busy, like,
Hmm.
a la Office Space, then now you have the opportunity to get your work done. You can wake up at 4 in the morning. This is going back to Gary Vaynerchuk. One of the things that he says, what are you
Hmm.
doing between the hours of like 4 and 7 and 7 and 2? What are you doing to fill that time? And now you can actually start to pursue
Hmm.
that side hustle and figure it out. And also, I think one of the things that you guys are offering that again, it kind of goes back to that thing we were talking about universities and being a realistic alternative now is I think if people realize the value of self-education, if they will just realize what they can learn
Hmm.
from mentors and learn from people that have done it. And I know as an entrepreneur myself, excuse me, I know one of the things I love to tell people about is all the mistakes I made. I mean, talking about the successes doesn't make you any better, really. I mean, it's telling you how I failed and recouped to then find the success. I mean, yeah, if there's a silver bullet that I've discovered and how to be successful and starting a business and raising capital, whatever. But generally, I think that's one of the things that's so cool about an organization like what you're running, man, is that people can go and sit down with like the founder that you're talking about and go, "Hey, man, tell me about your worst mistake. Tell me about the
Hmm.
worst, just when you just really
Hmm.
just completely misread the tea leaves and took a
Hmm.
dive and the pool wasn't quite as deep as you thought it was." Those are the stories that I know personally speaking as an entrepreneur, I love to tell on myself because that's where I learn the most. And I think only people that have been in that position again, I hate to beat up on the academics, but they're so easy. And now the flip thing is, like, at the University of Arkansas, you've got a guy like, Jeff's his name, right? The founder.
Mhm, mhm,
You got a guy like Jeff that they will actually bring in.
mhm,
That's awesome. That's what the value to me was with SMU, is that, Bill Dillon, who was one of my professors there, had a monster exit, and now he's teaching me. So that guy had
mhm,
done it. A lot of these universities, it's kinda like there's this old movie called Cocktail with Tom Cruise, and he's sitting in, like, some New York, community college business class, and he finally just calls this professor out who's just being a complete jerk to all these people who had written their business plans, and he's making fun of them, making light of them. And basically, Tom Cruise says, "Yeah, well, I'd rather be out there doing something than in here hiding in a classroom, because you can't really do the stuff.
mhm,
It is all theory." Another thing too, man, that I thought about when you were talking about this point in particular, and this is something that happened to me. So when I was 28, I mean, I didn't know anything really. This is my first business I'd ever run. I made all kinds of mistakes. Then I go to business school, and if you're not careful, sitting in that classroom, you'll get the curse of knowledge. There's a certain value to naivete. There's a certain value
mhm,
to not knowing just how dangerous it really is what you're doing. I mean,
mhm,
it sounds counterintuitive, but when you go to business school, you're gonna learn all the mistakes you can make. You're gonna learn all the things that can go wrong, and you will know it at such a micro level that you're like, I'm not gonna move. And so I remember that was one of the crazy things for me is I came out so much more conservative in my business mindset,
mhm,
knowing all the things that I had done wrong, and I look back and I go, "My God, how did I not go bankrupt back in those early days?"
mhm,
Um, so and again, that's not to say that there isn't a place for business school. Arkansas has a great business school.
mhm,
I love my business school, Cox School of Business, SMU. There's some great business schools, and they serve their purpose. But if you really wanna be someone that's, like, tapping into the ecosystem of Startup Junkie, then you may it may be the thing to do, but man, I would say go talk to you and your team first and try to get your idea moving. And then here's another thing too, man, that going back to James Altucher is, and I think this is where an organization like yours can be so freaking helpful, is he always says, "Get one customer." Just get one freaking
mhm,
customer. Everybody
mhm,
thinks, "I can't start my company, it's
mhm,
afraid to go conquer the world," or they'll do like, "Well,
mhm,
it's a billion person market share, and if I can just have this little sliver of
mhm.
150,000." Go get one.
Start with one.
One, and like we were saying, going around the farmer's market, go find somebody that is just excited that they put down their freaking locally raised honey and turn to you and say, "Tell me more. I'm
Yep.
in." And I know I suffer from that. I had to have some,
Mhm,
we're starting this company, in the health and wellness space. I told my guys the other day, I was like, "Look, here's the deal. We just gotta sell the let's get one customer. Let's just get one customer. Let's sell one unit of product and build from there." And I think people lose sight of those, my business partner, Gus Vickery, he always says, "Don't curse the days of small beginnings." Do not, because that's
mhm,
where it all starts. Where you are. I mean, I love the story of
mhm,
Sam Walton, that first store in Bentonville. He had
mhm,
watermelons blowing up. It was too hot. People thought he
mhm,
was nuts. "What are you doing? You're gonna have a store
mhm.
with all this crap in it." And I'd say that worked out pretty well.
I think it worked out pretty well, and, I think our organization and all the folks in Northwest Arkansas are are still benefiting from that
Right?
crazy vision.
Exactly.
Um, yeah, and to kinda go back to the academic aspect, we do at university, we do have, somebody that we partner with, the Office of Entrepreneurship and Innovation. We do a lot of great work with them. And I will say the model that they've taken in that approach is to get students out of the classroom. And I think that's so important. They've created a space where students can go learn and fail in a setting like that, and it's so beneficial. They give them space to feel like they have an address and an HQ outside of a classroom to really kind of feel like they're actually doing something without necessarily the bumpers or guardrails of a classroom. So I think that's super valuable. And to your point about just some naivete going into it. On our podcast, Start Junkies podcast, we ask every guest at the end of each episode, And if you had the opportunity to hop in your time machine to go back to whatever point, when you were starting that venture, with all the accumulated knowledge that you now have, what advice would you give your younger self prior to launching that business? And some of the best answers that I've heard was absolutely nothing. I've heard people say, I wouldn't tell myself a thing because if I'd known what I was going to go through, if I'd known how much it was going to, how much time it was going to take, how much money I was going to spend to get from there to the success, that I've eventually reached, I might not ever do it. I might have taken that day job. I might not have gone that, taken that risk. I would have frightened the heck out of my younger self. And I thought that's, some of the more profound answers because it's true. If people knew what all it goes into it, sometimes it's, they may go to that job fair and go ahead and drop that resume off at Walmart or wherever else.
Yeah. 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 No, I think that's pretty cool. That's actually, because it is, I'm telling you, there's that curse of knowledge. It's good to know, it's good to have that wisdom, but man, there is the curse of knowledge. Well, Caleb, dude, this was fun, man. I love talking shop. And let's touch. I would love to. Maybe I'll come up to Fayetteville and tour your facility.
Yeah, absolutely. We'd love to have you.
Oh man, I'd love to see some way to learn from you guys and implement some of your best practices here in Tyler. With
Absolutely.
Also, probably want to introduce you to our executive director, James Hart.
Yeah.
Get you on our podcast, and maybe I can reciprocate because
absolutely
no better way to grow a podcast and to go on other people's, right? So
absolutely. Yeah. We'd love to have you.
All right. Well, good deal. Well, man, all right, tell people from either Northwest Arkansas or other people that like me that have organizations like that they're leading or sitting on boards of, how can they reach you guys, follow your success, follow what you're doing, and look at it as kind of a potential blueprint for their own organization?
Yeah.
Way to follow you guys.
Absolutely. So our website is startjunkie.org. We're on all the social media channels, except TikTok. We're, on LinkedIn, Facebook, all of those. You can find me on LinkedIn. Feel free to shoot me a connect, and shoot me a message if you have questions. My email is also on the website. You can find me or any of our team members. Our bios are on there. So if there's any specific area that you're interested in, whether that be the capital raise side or the marketing side or anything like that, just shoot an email to whoever is on there that you think is most applicable. But that's what we're here for. We're here to help. So I encourage people to reach out.
Awesome. Caleb, this was a fun conversation, brother. Thanks for being on the Jason Wright Show. Folks, thank you so much for listening, and never stop improving. Always and always. We're out.
I appreciate it.
You bet, man. Well, that does it for this episode of The Jason Wright Show. Thank you so much for listening. This has been a Texas Titan Media production. Fourth Wall did the music. And as always, thank you so much for listening. Please consider going out to jasonwrightnow.com and signing up for the Vitruvian letter. Also, please go out to iTunes. It takes like 30 seconds to just leave us a 5-star rating. It does wonders for the podcast. I would be so grateful. And with that, until we meet again, go crush it and endeavor to improve always in all ways. I'm out.